Hey guys, welcome to Crater Mania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater. And I'd like to welcome you back to the 500 Movies in 2025 series here on my channel. And for this episode, this will be um, movies number 206 through 207. So this is going to be a short stream. Um, so I was originally supposed to have done this stream this past Sunday on Mother's Day. Um, but just got super busy, and then I was like, okay, I'll do it like on Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that. Because Monday I was gone to Louisville. We went to Louisville for the Monday Night Raw at the KFC Yum Center. Um, and I said, well, I said I'm not gonna be able to do it on Monday, so I said I'll do it on like Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. And didn't get around to that. It's just been doing a lot of stuff around the house. Had to cut the grass, just a bunch of different stuff. It just kind of like got me really tired, so I wasn't really like feeling up to par to do a stream on those nights. So I said, okay, I said I got to do this. I said because this is um, I'm taking a break for a while after this until Memorial Day. So I said, I gotta get this Mother's Day special done. Um, so here I am tonight, finally, with the Mother's Day special. 4 days late, I guess. Um, but before I get into tonight's show and talk about the movies for the Mother's Day special, um, just want to talk about some things that had been going on. Like I said, this past Sunday was Mother's Day. Of course, we went over and seen my mom, and Candace's mom was with us. Then we went out to eat and all that, and that was had a really good time with that. Also on Sunday, unfortunately, a hardcore wrestling legend, an icon. I mean, so many words to describe this guy. I mean, because he was what a true wrestling legend was, and that's the ECW hardcore icon Sabu. Passed away this past Sunday on Mother's Day. Um, and if you follow the channel regularly, a month ago, a little over a month ago now, I went to Prestonsburg, Kentucky, to a wrestling event, Wildfire Championship Wrestling, where I went to meet Sabu. Um, and it's so surreal. Like I said, I just saw this guy a month ago, and I had a conversation with him, and it's something that I'd been wanting to do for like it was like over 20 years or whatever. I've been wanting to meet that. I've been waiting to meet that guy, and finally, I did get to meet him, and it was like it was a dream come true because I for years, I've just idolized this guy. He was just a huge part of '90s wrestling, and just getting to meet him finally was so surreal. And then just to follow up on that, just the news, from this past Sunday that he passed away is just it's still kind of unbelievable. And they we went to Monday night when we went to Monday Night Raw this past Monday. I did take a sign with me. I made a sign for that night. Rest in peace, Sabu. And they did a little tribute to him during the show on Raw. So I thought that was really cool. And then last night on AEW Dynamite, um, and I posted about this on my Facebook, and I said that it's very rare for AEW to kind of do something better than WWE as far as production goes. But I will say this, that the tribute that they showed on AEW Dynamite last night for Sabu was extremely touching. and I thought it was really well done. And then to add on to that, they uh, had Taz say a few words about Sabu, what he meant to him, what Sabu meant to his career, and just it was all genuinely very heartfelt and just really cool. A lot of respect to AEW, to Taz, everybody involved with you know presenting that tribute to Sabu on AEW. Um, but just like I said, if you're not familiar with Sabu's career, if you're not super familiar with like ECW, um, just I highly, highly recommend if you're not a wrestling fan, if you're thinking about becoming a wrestler, you're thinking about getting into that, and highly recommend watching all of that ECW stuff from the '90s. If you have the Peacock streaming app, a lot of it's on there. There's some stuff on YouTube out there, stuff all over the internet. ECW. If it weren't for ECW and guys like Sabu, then the Attitude Era and WWF, I don't think would have ever existed because they borrowed so much from characters and stories in ECW, and Sabu was a big part of all of that. So, just and so just wanted to get that out of the way, get that off my chest because before I get into talking about these movies, and I know that's kind of on a somber note, but I just felt like I needed to speak on that, just to show my respect, pay my homage to the legendary hardcore icon Sabu. But now, back to the matter at hand here. So, the Mother's Day special that I was supposed to have done this past Sunday. So, like I said, this is going to be a really quick one because I'm only be covering two movies tonight. Um, and the first one, I mean, that we'll be talking about was a given, I think, as somebody that is a horror movie fan. Um, and if I'm doing a Mother's Day special, I can't do a Mother's Day special without covering this movie. And that's the 1980 horror film Mother's Day. Um, and at its core, Mother's Day is a deeply unsettling yet strangely hilarious just blend of these kind of slasher themes and backwoods horror, revenge thriller. It tells a story of these three young women. There's Abby, Jackie, and Trina, and they all reunite for this camping trip in the woods. And their whole idyllic retreat quickly kind of devolves into this nightmare when they're ambushed and they're captured, and they're just kind of subjected to all this sadistic torment by these two deranged inbred brothers, Ike and Adley. Um, and however, this isn't just another helpless victims film, or anything like that. The key to Mother's Day's unique appeal is its central concept. So the brothers aren't acting on their own twisted impulses alone. They're doing their mother's bidding, and all these sadistic games that they're playing and these kind of forced rituals, these just attempts to kill these women are all designed to please their manipulative and just utterly insane mother, who you know, is out at this kind of isolated shack in the woods, and and she demands just absolute obedience um, from these two, and and it's like entertainment to her. So she is like kind of like the puppet master here, orchestrating everything from her armchair or whatever, and and with um and there's just this kind of horrifying blend of this like passive aggressiveness and sadism, and she makes him sing for Mother, and perform wrestling matches, um, which is kind of ironic because I just talked about wrestling and Sabu. Um, and just they're disposing of these bodies, all while kind of offering this very warped like life lessons to them. So it's this is where I think that this film really distinguishes itself, uh, and why it resonates so strongly with fans who kind of like that bit of you know style and horror. Um, so after enduring all this, unimaginable trauma, these women, you were the ones that are able to survive. They managed to escape, but instead of simply running for help, they decided to go back, and just fueled by rage and adrenaline, and they all kind of have their little individual strengths. Um, like because Abby has like this knowledge of survival, and Jackie is very resourceful, and Trina, who proves to be surprisingly resilient in this and all this. Um, so they put together and they launched this kind of brutal and very creative counterattack on Mother and her sons. Um, and this isn't just survival. It's visceral, earned revenge. Executed with these kind of inventive methods, using everything from like household cleaners to the furniture. So in detail, I mean, it's three friends lost in the woods, plus this inbred psychotic family, plus these unforgettable, this disturbing mother figure, and just I mean, there's a lot of darkly kind of comedic torture in it, and just um, very unexpected, just like victim revenge as well. Like so, with the girls coming back and kind of plotting their own plan against this family. It's altogether, it's just this genuine cult classic that really defies any kind of just simple categorization. Um, it's it's exploitation with this kind of surprising amount of character building, and just this, and it's also kind of like a slasher, where the killers are driven by these kind of bizarre family dynamics, and also a revenge film in there as well. Like that's both hard to watch. Especially one scene in particular, and just it's kind of cathartic, by the end. Um, and the director of Mother's Day is Charles Kaufman, and he's the brother of Lloyd Kaufman, who is co-founder of Trauma Entertainment. So while Lloyd is arguably, I think more he's more famous, for the Trauma brand and all that. Films like Toxic Avenger, Romeo and Juliet, and all that stuff. Um, Charles Kaufman kind of had his own distinct um, directorial output. Um, and I think he's primarily known for directing this film, Mother's Day. Um, but he was also heavily involved with Trauma in a lot of various capacities alongside Lloyd. often as a producer or a writer or other technical roles on numerous films, before and after Mother's Day. Um, and I think I did some research on him. He had some other directorial credits. That are not as prominent as this one. Like there's one film called The Secret of the Ice Cave, which is like seen more of as a family film, like a family adventure film. Um, and just a couple things like that I wasn't really super familiar with. But I guess in essence, while Lloyd Kaufman became the face of Troma's brand of like, of low budget, politically incorrect, absurdity, that kind of thing. Um, Charles Kaufman is the one who delivered this movie, Mother's Day, and that and this film definitely shares a lot of some of Troma's very rebellious spirit, and but it kind of occupies a more of a more nastier, more genuinely frightening, corner of the whole exploitation landscape. Um, but Mother's Day might not have been like a box office smash or, or anything like that, or but I think it's really carved out a very significant and lasting legacy within the horror community. Particularly those who kind of like dive into that whole grittier side of 80s, movies. And this is it being this cult classic, like I mentioned. I think that's probably the biggest part of the legacy for this film because Mother's Day really became like this kind of staple of late night cable and VHS rentals throughout the 80s and the 90s. Which and that's where it really established this kind of devoted following from fans, and because there's a lot of fans, including myself, that really appreciate its kind of like uncompromising nature. It's got a very unique tone to it. The villains here are very memorable, and there's a lot of people that always discuss this film, in lists of kind of like underrated or overlooked 80s horror, and I definitely agree with that. Um, and just, you know, there was a lot of influence from this on the whole like victim revenge theme. While this wasn't the first film that, feature like these victims that are fighting back, um, Mother's Day is just, I think, a key example from the early 80s that strongly like influenced the evolution of the whole revenge thriller within horror, and it showcased that the the hero characters here who, despite being brutalized by these evil sons of bitches, um they find this strength to kind of to make themselves retaliate, very effectively and viciously against these guys and their mother. Um, so this kind of stood, in contrast to many slashers of the time where, where victims were often passive. Films like I Spit on Your Grave is kind of a predecessor to this, and because it came out in 1978, and but Mother's Day brought a different kind of low budget, backwoods intensity to that concept. And I just think that the mother in this movie of these guys, is one of the most unforgettable horror villains. When you're talking about, underrated horror from the 80s, I think she would be considered one of the most like unforgettable within that list. Because she's not, she's not a mass slasher or a supernatural entity or anything like that. She's just this kind of very terrifying, realistic, figure of just toxic parenthood and and psychological manipulation. She predates a lot of other female horror villains who aren't simply like final girls or victims. And her her dynamic with her sons in this, just kind of turning them into these instruments of her like perverse will or whatever is very chilling and can be seen as influential for later horror films with the same types of themes. Um, and just like I said, before, this film is just a great example, of that whole raw, low budget, and independent horror films that was thriving, in the early 1980s. Um, and is just really fueled by that, the VHS, the home video market at the time. Um, and while sometimes this has, been debated how officially uh, this movie is as a trauma film, um, I just think its connection, with Charles Kaufman and the whole like stylistic, sensibilities that are like kind of firmly in place here with this film, is really what trauma would become, as far as like being, influence and distribution. And um, I think that this one is one of the earliest, respected films out there from trauma. Um, and there was a remake of this movie from 2010, and I've not seen that one. Not really interested in seeing it, but I have seen some reviews, and typically I don't go by like other people's reviews because I believe in watching something for yourself and creating your own opinion. Um, so I could tell you that I don't like them, that I've seen a movie that I don't like a movie, but I don't advise you to go on my opinion or anybody else's. I advise you to watch that movie for yourself and form your own opinion on that. Um, but like I said, I have read reviews though, even that the Mother's Day remake is not that great. Um, but I could watch it and think completely different. But just like I said, I don't really have any interest in watching it. Um, but overall, the original Mother's Day from 1980 is, again, like I said, just it's beloved cult classic, and it's been recognized for its blend of horror and humor. The memorable villain in the mother and her two sons, um, and just this really empowering portrayal of this victim revenge within this whole gritty landscape of 80s exploitation movies. Um, yeah, so if you've never seen Mother's Day, I highly recommend it. Um, I usually watch this movie every year as kind of a staple of Mother's Day every year. So I definitely didn't want to pass up that opportunity to be able to talk about it with you guys here on the channel as a part of the 500 movies in 2025. Um, so yeah, I mean it's a fun movie. Like I said, it's very disturbing at times, but that comes to be expected with 80s horror most of the time. But moving on now to the next film and last one I'll be talking about for tonight. Um, and this is the movie from the 90s. And this is, I always throw this movie into the whole category of horror. But it's a mixture of like horror, drama, thriller. I mean, there's a lot. It's a crazy movie. Like and it's a movie, that. So I'm a huge fan of Jamie Lee Curtis, and so I feel like this is one of her most underrated films. And this is Mother's Day from 1993. Mother's Day. I'm sorry. This is Mother's Boys from 1993. Sorry guys, I've not had enough sleep. But yeah, this is Mother's Boys from 1993. And like I said, I'm a big fan of Jamie Lee Curtis. I think this is one of her most underrated films. You know, when I stumbled upon this movie years ago, and I believe this is when Netflix was doing like the rental thing with the DVDs you could get through the mail and all that. And I think I just kind of stumbled across it, while I was looking for movies to add to my queue to have sent to me to watch on DVD. And this was one of them because I noticed that, oh, this is a Jamie Lee Curtis movie. I've never seen this. So I rented it, and it really just, after watching this movie all those years ago for the first time, it really opened up this kind of whole new, like, unsettling, like, wing, I guess, of Jamie Lee Curtis, and just the range that she has as an actress. So it was really surprising to me to see her in this type of role, but it's very cool. Like, when I was watching this again this past week, it was just like, it's so insane, like, because she is insane in this movie, and it's unlike any other role that you'll ever see her in. Um, and like I said, this movie isn't like your typical horror film. Um, you know, but for those of us that really appreciate horror in all of its you know different forms, especially the kind that kind of burrows under your skin and messes with your head, um, and just people that really adore Jamie Lee Curtis, as she is this, because she's this genre legend, and just to see her kind of like, you know, be in this kind of role in Mother's Boys is it really makes this movie super underrated, and it's overlooked. Not enough people talk about this movie. Um, so Mother's Boys is this psychological like thriller, that is just really drenched in these primal anxieties of a family breaking down, and um, it tells a story of this woman, that Jamie Lee Curtis, she's this who 3 years prior to everything, she just abruptly abandons her family. This seemingly perfect life of her husband and these three boys. Just without a word, she just abandons them. So the film opens up with her abruptly trying to return back into her ex husband and the boys' lives. And so she just kind of shows up out of the blue, just announcing that she's back, and she wants her family, specifically, her boys back. And the problem though is that her husband has moved on. He's now happily involved with this woman named Callie, um, who's played by Joanne Whalley Kilmer, which you may know also from Willow. And the boys, especially the oldest, is they're confused, they're hurt, and they just kind of they kind of harbor this really deep seated resentment towards their mother. So what quickly kind of unfolds isn't like your simple story of uh, it's not this simple story of just uh, reconciling. So Jamie Lee Curtis's character, um, she isn't seeking forgiveness. She's demanding possession of these boys. So she's manipulative. She's emotionally detached, and just she's just determined, to just to kind of reclaim her former life and her sons. Regardless of the emotional damage that's been left behind. So the film at this point is kind of starting to morph into this very tense, uncomfortable, exploration of this dark side of her character. And The horror in this film is, it isn't external. It's domestic. It's psychological. It's just deeply unsettling at times. So the film really excels at depicting this very kind of claustrophobic tension within the family home, as Jamie Lee Curtis's presence disrupts everything. Her relationship with the boys, especially the oldest, is particularly central here. It's this kind of this very intense bond that has been fueled by these kind of unresolved feelings and just her manipulative nature. And it leads to all these kind of very disturbing actions. Like, you know, the film builds all this dread through this very suffocating atmosphere. There's a lot of unsettling dialogue and just her performance in this will really make your skin crawl. I think at times it's about the horror of a parent who is a stranger, the terror of being emotionally held captive by someone who should love you unconditionally, and just you know this devastating consequences of just this kind of unresolved trauma. It all leans into this very dramatic stuff, at times, but that whole melodrama wielded as like this weapon to kind of heighten that psychological intensity. And the director here is a guy named Yves Semino, and he's not anybody that is had this very storied career or anything. Um, he's but he does kind of have a style that is similar to like Carpenter or Hitchcock. Um, and again, like I said, just definitely check this movie out if you've never seen it. Because in this movie, the director here, he kind of really he demonstrates a knack for building suspense within these kind of confined spaces, and focusing on these character interactions and just all these um these emotions that these characters are having, and he uses like close-ups, effectively to capture like the the psychological turmoil, and he avoids all these like overly stylistic flourishes, allowing this disturbing story and performances to really drive the dread in the film. um and like I said, this guy, he's not primarily known as a horror director or anything, or um but his work here really shows this kind of strong command of you know, psychological tension, which really made him a solid choice for this film. Um, and I mean, this movie, it doesn't like hold the same iconic status as other films in Jamie Lee Curtis's career, obviously. Um, and it might not even be really considered a cult classic because, like I said, I don't even hear a lot of people talk about this film. But I think, like, as far as its legacy goes, it's just it's very to me it's very underrated. It's very intriguing, and just especially with Jamie Lee Curtis being in that role, this psychotic role as this overbearing and possessive mother who goes to lengths as like even hurting herself to make it look like the her ex husband's new girlfriend is attacking her, and um, it's just there's a lot of bizarre stuff in this movie that just it makes it stand out for sure to me. Um, you know, and for a Jamie Lee Curtis fan, this like I said, this movie came out years after her whole Scream Queen phase that she went through with the Halloween and Prom Night, Terror Train, stuff like that. But this is a movie that just really kind of offers this very powerful testament to her abilities as this serious, dramatic actress. Um, I mean, she plays a character in this who is deeply flawed, unsympathetic, manipulative, just detached from reality, which is a far cry from these relatable final girls that she's famous for. Um, this role for is just a more raw, complex performance that proves that she can embody these truly disturbing characters, and it's just its impact I think on her career is just really demonstrating her versatility, beyond horror. Even if the film itself isn't widely seen. Um and this film really just serves as a solid example of how horror can manifest in the most intimate setting, which is a family home. It taps into these kind of universal fears that people have about abandonment and betrayal, and just the idea that people closest to us can be the most dangerous sometimes. Um, its impact on the genre is perhaps less about innovation and more about reinforcement, which shows the enduring power of domestic conflict as this source of terror. Um, so it sits alongside other like psycho, biddy, or toxic, family thrillers. Kind of offering this very particularly chilling take on maternal figures. Um, like Psycho, but that's a little bit different. Um, but it just kind of it has that vibe to it though. Um, I don't know. You just have to watch the movie to kind of like understand what I'm understand what I'm talking about. Um, but I guess in conclusion with this, as a horror and as a Jamie Lee Curtis fan, Mother's Boys is I feel it's a required viewing. If you're a fan of Jamie Lee Curtis, and if it's you're looking for a movie of hers that you've never seen before, definitely definitely watch this one. I think, like I said, I think it's super underrated, and it's a challenging watch. It's kind of a slow burn in the beginning, um, but I mean, maybe about 30 minutes in, the movie really starts to pick up. There's a lot. There's some jump scares in this. It's kind of like out of nowhere, um, and I just think like that really builds that creeping dread throughout the whole film, and just there's this very emotional manipulation with the audience that the film has. Um, and just Jamie Lee Curtis delivers, this performance that is just of this deeply unsettling character, and it reminds us why she's this icon of horror. She's a phenomenal actress. It's um, just the impact for fans for this, you know, intense like psychological aspect of the movie is I think significant here. It's dark, it's disturbing. It's just the entire thing here is just very compelling. Into this heart of this broken family, and I think this movie really deserves more recognition than what it has. So yeah, I highly recommend this movie, Mother's Boys from 1993. Definitely check it out, whether you're a Jamie Lee Curtis fan or not. If you're just a fan of horror, of thrillers, of just utterly bizarre um, uh, films about broken families. I don't know. This movie could really appeal to a lot of different audiences. But yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. It is on Tubi. It is on Tubi for free, so you guys can check that out. You don't have to pay for it, so it's definitely just go to Tubi, watch Mother's Boys, and I don't think you'll will be disappointed. But like I said, guys, that will be it for this video. I just wanted to do this really short as this Mother's Day special that I was supposed to done like 4 days ago. Uh, and I'm gonna be taking a break for a little bit from the channel now. I'll be back on Memorial Day, so with a Memorial Day special, and then everything to follow after that, the 500 movies in 2025. But you know, I really enjoyed doing this video for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed um, these movies that I talked about tonight. And if you were watching this live, if you're watching this on replay, just thank you guys for even taking the time to check out this video. It's not what I normally do, but like I said, just it's been kind of a rough week, and just like um, and I just wanted to throw something together really quick for Mother. I had more stuff planned for the Mother's Day special. I had a couple other movies that I was going to be talking about, but I just kind of had to shorten it down, unfortunately. But thank you guys for checking this out, and just drop me a comment below on what your favorite of these two movies are, and or if you don't, if you have another movie that you like to watch on Mother's Day, let me know what it is in the comments. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. Um, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. Like I said, it'll be, you can check all those out in the meantime. So I'm gonna be out for about another week and a half. I'll be back on Memorial Day. Um, so click that bell for any kind of future notifications. And with all that said, I'm Crater. This is Crater Mania. I love you guys. Have a good night.